How we doing this evening? That's it, just good. Good food, good, all right. Have a good evening, I'm done. My name is Tim Ryan. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic and drug addict, sober by the grace of God, in a wonderful 12-step based fellowship that starts with an A and ends with an A. I bet you can figure it out. Today's it's a pretty cool day that I'm here because I carry this coin in my pocket, and today I'm 6 years clean and sober. So, yeah, opted to hop on a plane and come down to sunny Florida. You know, in the past 4.5 years, I've had some really cool things happen. I was a guest to the 2016 State of the Union address. Has anyone here been to the State of the Union? Didn't think so. I sat from here to Michelle Obama. I was wrote up in Newsweek magazine as one of the 18 most interesting guests invited to the State of the Union. I've been on the front page of the Chicago Sunday Edition Tribune. I've been in over 500 publications. I've been on the Steve Harvey Show, Dr. Drew, Lisa Ling, CNN, The Doctor's TV Show, Fox and Friends, Fox Business News, Martha McCullough, Varney and Company, CNN, you name it, I've done it. I had my own documentary last year on A&E called Dope Man. It premiered after the season premiere of Interventions. If you have Amazon Prime, you can go home and watch it. It's $4.95. I don't make $1, but it's a good day in the life of what I do. I published a book, From Dope to Hope. You all get free copies. In January of 2018, I was wrote up in Real Leaders magazine as one of the top 100 visionary thought leaders in the world, along people like Oprah Winfrey, Bill and Melinda Gates, Elon Musk, Mikhail Gorbachev, and Tim Ryan. 5 years ago today, I was an inmate in the Illinois Department of Corrections. See, I also go by R68915. That's my Illinois Department of Corrections prison number. That's where I ultimately got clean and sober. I can assure you, when I grew up in the northwest suburbs of Illinois in a town by the name of Crystal Lake, I never wanted to be an alcoholic or drug addict. I wanted to be a professional water skier and a stuntman. Not in a million years did I want to struggle with substance abuse. I did not come from a bad family. We're all adopted. My older brother is just kind of a jerk. There's me, my little brother and sister. They're 3/4 Native American, Chippewa Indian. My dad had worked at the Chicago Board of Trade for 26 years, a little company by the name E.F. Hutton. He ran the entire country in 26 years. My father never missed a day of work. My mom co-founded a multi-billion-dollar nonprofit called Market Day, which was a food co-op through all the schools, and they sold food, and profits came in. We had dinner every night at 6:30. As we were poor growing up, a vacation was throw the canoe on the van, go up to Wisconsin, canoe down the Wisconsin River, pitch a tent. Any sporting event we're at, my parents were at. As we made more money, or they made more money, we got to go to Colorado snow skiing. My parents, grandparents had a place over in Sarasota, so we're at Lido Beach for years. Now they've got a place down in the Keys, my parents. So family was everything to my parents. Where'd I go wrong? About 3.5 years ago, I saw a doctor speak in Chicago by the name of Dr. Gabor Mate. Dr. Mate has been working with people that struggle with addiction for over 40 years out of Vancouver, British Columbia. And when Dr. Mate meets with somebody struggling with addiction, he doesn't ask why the addiction, he asks why the pain. What's the underlying pain or trauma that keeps driving you to keep making the bad choices you make? He said it either has to do with emotional loss, someone dying, grief, or the other factors of trauma are emotional, spiritual, physical, sexual, emotional. And I looked at my life and said, I don't have any trauma. And then he asked a question. He said, how many people in the audience are adopted? And I put up my hand. He said, do you realize you're 48,000 times more susceptible to become an alcoholic or drug addict due to the abandonment issues? Wow. Then I started looking at my life. See, I was a stupid kid growing up, ADD, learning disabilities. When I graduated high school, I had a 1.4 grade average. Anyone here take the ACT? Anybody remember what they got on it? What'd you get? 30. The hell they feed you? Yeah, perfect score on the ACT is a 36. I took it 5 times. I received an 11 each time. At 50 years old, I can't tell you how to use the word there in a sentence. T-H-E-R-E-I-E-R, the other way, throw that stuff out the window. I don't comprehend it. I don't process it. Verbs, adjectives, pronouns, I don't know what the hell they are. I had an older brother that was a narcissist. He beat me up every day for 8 years, and I was molested by a female babysitter at 12 years old. Boom, there was my trauma. What was my solution? Drinking and drugs. The only thing I excelled at growing up was water skiing. We lived on a lake from 14 to 21. I was one of the top-ranked barefoot water skiers in the country. That means I water ski on my feet. I used to train over in Lantana, Florida since I was 14 years old. Every Christmas and every spring break, I was down in Florida training to barefoot water ski. I trained with the world champion at the time. But outside of that, it was partying. But when I grew up, the drinking age was 18 years old up in Wisconsin. My best friend was a senior in high school. I was a freshman. So we're up in Wisconsin drinking every weekend. But back then, people weren't getting DUIs. I lived on a lake. The deal was you come out on the boat, you're bringing gas or beer. That's how it operated. At 15 years old, I was at a party. Some older kids were doing cocaine. I tried one line. I fell in love with cocaine. High school, I got on the work program. I was out of school at 10:30 in the morning. I'd go to the pizza shop, flip on the ovens, go home water ski all afternoon, and go flip pizzas every night. But every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, someone's phone over here is blowing up. Every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, it was drinking. It was cocaine. But very quickly for me, see, it's always the damn lawyer. Always the lawyer. Sorry it doesn't cut it. I'll take a check. Since they took a lot of my money, I kind of got a resentment towards lawyers. I do. I spent a lot of money on lawyers. We'll get to that. But for me, very quickly, the party never ended. See, very quickly, I found myself with myself, by myself, crying to myself. The hardest thing for anyone to do is to put their hand up and ask for help. And I don't care if it has to do with addiction. It could be mental health. It could be in life. It could be a family member struggling with addiction or cutting or bullying or cancer, and we keep this in, especially a lot of males, due to our ego or pride. We don't want other people to know. Especially the older generation of my generation. Quit crying, man up. Man up. Be a big man. When I got out of high school, I went down to college in Louisiana for a couple different reasons. A, they had open admission, so if you paid the bill, you can go to college. I went down to Northeast Louisiana University in Monroe, Louisiana, because they had the best intercollegiate water ski team in the country. I went to get on the water ski team. It was also 3-to-1 girl to guys. You could hunt and fish in the last state to have the drinking age 18. So Louisiana sounded like a good idea. Hopped on the plane with my mom, flew down there. As soon as she flew back, I was at the liquor store. And there was a drug back then, still around now, MDMA or ecstasy. Ecstasy was legal in the state of Texas in 1985. They sold it in bars. They made it illegal, and there's a lot of quantities of X around, pharmaceutical grade. So we started running drugs between Dallas, Houston, Vicksburg, Mississippi. We'd go buy 5,000 hits of X for $1 a piece, $5 grand, and sell them for 10, 15 bucks. But that allotted me the opportunity to do more drugs. I got into more cocaine, more ecstasy, some pills, drinking. I had a sticker on the back of my 78 Ford Fairmont that said, "In search of the eternal buzz." See, I was always searching for happiness through drugs and alcohol, when in hindsight, they caused all my problems. See, the water ski team I went to get on, I never got on. Because I started being told something, "Mr. Ryan, you're a liability. You don't show up for practice. You don't go to class. You can't be on the team." Two things I really remember about college. Anyone here going to admit to listening to country western music? Anybody ever heard of Tim McGraw? Oh, yeah. I went to college with Tim. But he did not go by the name Tim McGraw. He went by the name Tim Smith. We weren't friends. I'd say we're acquaintances. He was in the Pike fraternity. And he used to play his guitar every Wednesday night at Enoch's Cafe. And we're up there one night, and I can distinctly remember one of his friends saying, "Tim, why don't you take your father's last name?" See, his father was Tug McGraw, a professional baseball player. He said, "Because my dad's a loser. He's an alcoholic." If you follow Tim McGraw is also an alcoholic, but he's been clean and sober since 2008. So what that showed me was two things. Due to the shame, guilt, remorse, stigma that Tim's father, a professional baseball player, was an alcoholic, he didn't take his last name because he didn't want people to know who his dad was. And on the second side, the disease of addiction is hereditary. It gets passed down generation to generation. Second thing I remember about college is Marion Barber. Beautiful Southern belle from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Marion wanted me to go on a date with her on a Wednesday night, go to a Peking Inn, all-you-could-eat buffet, and she wanted me to go to church. Well, I went to Freddie's Bar. It was $5 all you could drink. I went and got drunk. And the next morning, Marion came to my house, and she was crying. And she said, Tim, why would you not take the time to go to dinner with me and go to church? And I looked at her and said, well, who the hell goes to church on a Wednesday night? The bar had $5 all you could drink. I went to the bar and got drunk. But that's where my thinking was at. The party was more important than taking the time to get to know that nice young lady and go to dinner and go to church. What if 30 years ago, I would have went to dinner with her and I would have went to church? Maybe I wouldn't have went down the road I went down. But I never knew how to put my hand up and ask for help. I got kicked out of college, came back, did some odd jobs, got into doing more cocaine, smoking cocaine, dealing cocaine. And at 21 years old, I checked myself into drug treatment. I'm 21 years old. I'm legal to drink in September. And in January of 1990, I'm checking myself into drug treatment. When I went into treatment the first time, I went in with the thought pattern, I just want to quit doing drugs and I want to figure out how to drink alcohol like a normal person. I liked treatment. I went through the motions. A guy like me came in and spoke on February 2nd in 1990. The only reason I remember the day was my parents' wedding anniversary. And the guy shared his story, and when he was done, he looked at all 38 of us and he said, one of you will be sober in a year and a third of you will be dead. Right away, I put up my hand. I said, excuse me, sir, there's 38 of us. He said, listen to me, kid. One of you will be sober and a third of you will be dead. I said, what do I do? He said, don't drink, get a sponsor, work the steps, go to meetings. Sounds simple enough to me. And then my father sat me down. My father asked me one question, and it still bothers me to this day. So I love my parents more than anything in the world. My dad looked me in the eyes and he said, Tim, where did we go wrong as parents? And I said, Dad, you didn't do anything wrong. You adopted 4 kids. Hell, I can remember having 4 kids in a Volkswagen Bug. Family was everything. Eating shit on a shingle, tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. I won't eat those anymore. We had to eat that like 3 nights a week. The vacations, being at every event, supporting us for who we are, adopting 4 kids, having 2 minority kids in the early 70s when people didn't do things like that. I said, Dad, you didn't do anything wrong. And he said, oh, I know that. Has anybody heard of that cult called Al-Anon? Not one of you? Okay, thank God, Jiminy Christmas. Yeah, there's this cult called Al-Anon. It's for family members that have a loved one struggling in addiction. And my dad said, Tim, while you were in treatment, your mother and I got some help, and that cult got to my parents. And these famous words came out of my dad's mouth. He said, Tim, I didn't cause your disease, I can't cure it, and I can't control it, and I'm not going to contribute to it either. He said, you're welcome to come home, but the day you start drinking or using drugs, don't let the door hit you or God split you. Deal. So I started going to the Chris Lake Alamo Club, man. I went to meetings every day. And I put my hand up and looking for a sponsor, nobody would pick on me. I'd be like, yes, got away with it again. See, I'm the guy that thought I could get sober through osmosis. I hang out with sober people, I'll get sober. It doesn't work that way. And I started some businesses and a barefoot water ski school and an asphalt seal coating business, and had 8 of my buddies working for me, trying to save all my friends. And I started competing in barefoot water ski, and I won Illinois State, Wisconsin State, Michigan State. I slotted to win the U.S. Nationals that year, and I fell at the Midwest Regionals and blew out 3 discs in my lower back, L4, L5, and S1, and my career was over instantly. And then I met Dr. Wu. Here's 300 Vicodin. Take these a month. You're supposed to take all these every month. You're supposed to walk like a monkey. And that was it. So that's when I first started doing opiates. I didn't like what opiates did, so I went back to smoking weed. Very quickly, I went back to drinking and doing cocaine. Very quickly, I didn't have a business. I heard those words again, Tim, I'm taking the water ski school to Florida. You're not coming with, you're a liability. And then again, I'm with myself, by myself, crying to myself, saying, I can't stop. Knock on the apartment door, you're evicted. So I came up with the brilliant idea, I'll just move. So I packed up and I moved down to Austin, Texas with my best friend. Get away from all my problems. But there's a little saying, wherever you go, there you are. You take yourself and all your problems with you. So I moved down to Austin, started going to meetings. About 3 weeks in, I wanted to get high. I flipped on the news. I saw somebody was shot on 13th Street. Hopped on my motorcycle and I went to 13th Street because I know if they're shooting people, they're selling drugs. See, that's the way I think. You can put me in Bonita Springs or Fort Myers or wherever the hell you want, and I will find drugs within an hour. They are everywhere. They are not going anywhere. Anywhere in the United States, I will find drugs. I could probably find them on this property if I ask hard enough. I went back to doing cocaine. I pulled some credit card fraud on my friend. He had me arrested. Got to spend 30 days in the Travis County Jail. Being a white guy from Chicago on an all-black deck didn't go too well. Got my butt kicked a few times. Got out of jail, and my MO started to be go back to meetings. Because every time I had clarity, things would be okay. And I met some guys marketing cable television door to door that were all sober, so we hightailed it out of Texas. I think I had a warrant out for 20 years. And we were in Michigan and Buffalo, New York, and Colorado and California. And a year later, I went back to Williamsville, New York, and I started my own marketing company. I shacked up with a lady 10 years older than me, started drinking. The one thing I had in my life was work ethic. If you want something, you better work for it. I've been working since I was 9 years old. There was no handouts in the Ryan home. Of course, the first job I had was working at my dad's buddy's bar, humping up beer on the weekends for old man Hank, and I'd be down in the cooler at 10 years old cracking a brewski. And, you know, my dad still regrets that decision. I got a mouth like a trucker working for Dickie in his pizza place, but oh well. So I started this marketing company, and they were starting to lay all the fiber optics nationwide for the network we have today. Within 6 months, I had 60 people working for me nationwide, and I was pulling in about 25 grand a week. At 22 years old, I made my first million. I lost it by 23 because I went right back to drinking and doing drugs. Every time I made money, I thought I could drink and use like a normal person. 60 families were out of work because I'm the guy that couldn't put my hand up and ask for help. Back to Chicago, tail between my legs, $250,000 in debt, owed the IRS $80,000. Met this guy, Bob, went back to meetings, and Bob had a data processing recruiting firm. And Bob ended up hiring me, and I became a headhunter. In my first month, I made 9 grand. About 5 months in, I made 50,000, and I went right back to drinking and doing drugs. But if I was making that money, Bob was making it, so Bob let me do what I wanted. About 6 months later, I had the opportunity to go to work for a management consulting firm in Chicago that we had placed about 20 people at. They had 14 offices nationwide, and they were building out Chicago. And I went down there, and Pete, the vice president, hired me on the spot. Now, I have my first real corporate position. Remember, they gave me a $1,000 sign-on bonus, and I had to go buy 3 suits and 5 shirts and 5 ties so I could rotate the coats every other day and look like I knew what the hell I was doing. They paid me a $45,000 base salary and $3,000 commission for every person I hired. And I want people to understand, when I'm talking about money, I'm not talking about money to brag. For me, making money was really easy. But I had no concept of saving it, managing it, pay yourself first. I lived for the moment. I lived for today. I didn't plan down the future because I didn't think I'd make it the next 12 hours. Pete hired me. If he was in the office in Chicago at 6:30 in the morning, I was at my desk at 6 a.m. If he left at 7 at night, I left at 7:30. I was always in before the boss, and I never left until he left. There was a method to my madness because there was a Bennigan's restaurant in one of the towers off Cumberland Avenue in the 90 going into Chicago, and that's where I'd interview people all day. I'd sit at the bar, have a little cocaine delivered. I was supposed to hire 2 to 3 people a month. I was hiring 20 to 30 people a month. So within 6 months, they bumped me up to a $250,000 base salary. I'm now 26 years old. I'm making a $250,000. I'm the 3rd highest paid guy in a $50 million a year consulting firm. I've got a brand new Harley. I've got a custom ski-nautique boat. I've got a pearl white Jeep. Everybody I'm hiring has MBAs or PhDs from schools like Cal Poly, Berkeley, Harvard, Yale, MIT, Brown Rice, Northwestern. I only hired the best of the best. And I'm the guy with the 1.4 grade average who got the 11 on his ACT, making more money than all these saps. And my ego had blown through the roof. But the sad fact is, again, every night I'm with myself, by myself, crying to myself, saying I can't stop drinking and stop doing drugs. See, I had everything. I had all this materialistic crap that made me feel good that I rarely used. I always had money in my pocket, but I never let people get too close to me because I didn't want them to see how out of control my life was. I walked into work one day and there was a beautiful lady sitting behind the front desk. She had a peach outfit on. And I walked in with my smart mouth and I said, "Hey, Peachy, how are you?" I said, "I'm good." I said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm Shannon Hoban. Who are you?" And kind of puffed up my chest. "I am Tim Ryan, the director of recruiting." She goes, "Oh, you're the jerk that didn't want to hire me." I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Weren't you given my resume? Weren't you looking to hire a personal assistant?" I said, "Are you the banker lady?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't like bankers. I never called you in for an interview, but I'll make it up to you. I'll take you out for a drink." So a couple weeks later, Vic and I, the other recruiter, took Shannon down to Bennigan's, and she had 2 beers. She got up and went to the bathroom. And Vic goes, "Man, she's really cute. I'm asking her out." I said, "No, I got this one in the bag, buddy." And I walked down by the bathroom and I waited for her to come out and I kind of startled her and I gave her a kiss. I said, "You're my new girlfriend." She said, "I like that, but I got one question to ask you. Do you do drugs?" "No." Of course, everything that came out of my mouth was a lie. I said, "Why would you ask me if I do drugs?" She said, "I have a 3-year-old son by the name of Nicholas, who is a father that's an alcoholic and a drug addict who abandoned us the day he was born. I want nothing to do with anyone that does drugs." I said, "I don't do them." She said, "Good, let's go on another date." She went home to Naperville. I went to Chicago and bought a 1/4 ounce cocaine because everything that came out of my mouth was a lie. We started hanging out after work every night. On the weekends, we're out on the boat. Nick was around all the time. I cut back on the cocaine. And about 5-6 months into our relationship, Shannon says I'm pregnant. So I dragged her down to the courthouse and I married her. And I adopted Nick. And then Max came along. 9 months later, she was pregnant with Tanner. Tanner came along. 9 months after Tanner was born, well, hell, she was pregnant with Abby. Abby came along. See, the one thing I was good at was making babies. That's easy. Well, you guys are a tough damn crowd. Too many Christmas. Lighten the hell up. Go eat some of that shrimp before that ice melts. All kidding aside, my wife is pregnant with Tanner. Max is 14 months old and Nick's 5. We're living in a townhouse in downtown Naperville. I'm working at a management consulting firm, and my wife realizes she is living with a full-blown alcoholic and drug addict. But what my wife didn't do was tell anybody. Due to shame, guilt, stigma, she said a hell of a lot of novenas and prayers. She thought she could pray me to getting sober, but she didn't escalate it to my parents, her parents. She kept it this deep, deep, dark secret. I'd been up doing cocaine for a few days. I passed out and I woke up the next morning. My 14-month-old son, Max, was crawling towards my home office. So I went and picked Max up and I put him in his bedroom and I opened my office door and there was cocaine all over the floor. If my son, Max, would have crawled in that room, pushed that door open, put one of those rocks of cocaine in his mouth, it would have killed him. So it scared the hell out of me. What's my MO? Back to meetings. Now this time I made it over 14 months clean. Kind of got a sponsor, kind of worked the steps. Started another consulting firm with my old boss. We were making a ton of money. Building a beautiful 5-bedroom, 3-car garage house out in the suburbs. My neighbor and I ran 35 Cub Scout dens, we were pack masters, every Pinewood Derby, every parade. Life was good. And then I met Joel. I met Joel at one of those meetings. We started hanging out. About 3 weeks later, he asked me to take him to Chicago to move out of his apartment, which I said sure, because I'm a people pleaser and I don't know how to say no. How do you think I ended up here tonight? For free? Only joking. No, I did not, and I want to mention that too. I did not charge to come here tonight. I charged a lot of money to speak. Then I put down my foundation, give it all away. But I did not charge to come here tonight because I believe in what they're doing here. If I believe in it, I'll do it for free all day long. But I truly believe in what's happening here, and we'll get into that. Shit, there's my ADD again. So anyhow, I take Joel down to Chicago, and we're moving him out of his apartment. And out of the bedroom, his roommate Sava pops. "What are you doing here?" He said, "I'm moving out, Joel. What are you doing?" "Heroin. You want to do some?" "Sure." Now, I'm 14 months sober, but I'm not living a life of recovery because I'm the guy that thought I'd get sober. It's like me wanting to be a damn doctor. I just want to go sit at that table and I'll become a doctor. Doesn't work that way, does it? You got to put forth the effort, train, everything else. So I tried one bag of heroin. That was it. That one bag of heroin turned into a 12-year habit at about $500 a day. I've overdosed on heroin 8 times. I've been clinically dead 3. I've had 2 heart attacks from my cocaine use. Statistically, I should be dead or in prison. I should not be here 6 years clean and sober today sharing my message with you. One bag of heroin. I know I got a bunch of doctors here and a bunch of smart people, but I want to explain something to you when it comes to opiates. I usually am inside, but if I were to bring out a table of fine booze and this high-grade weed, and we all smoked weed and drank for a week straight, at the end of the week, from here over, might have a substance abuse issue. But if I were to line the table full of opiates, when I talk opiates, it could be hydrocodone, Vicodin, Percocet, Percodan, Demerol, Dilaudid, Oxycontin, oxymorphine, Loratab, Opana, methadone, heroin, fentanyl, Suboxone, those are all opiates. If I were to line a table here and we all did opiates for a week straight, every person in here will be a full-blown opiate addict. 95% of the people that get hooked on opiates will never get clean and sober. 95%. They'll end up in 2 places, dead or in prison. There are over 22 million people nationwide lost in addiction today. Last year, we lost, they say, 72,000 people to opiate-related overdoses. You've got to get off this. So I quit taking it. Yeah, that was hell on earth for about 2 days, and I couldn't handle it. And I called Ray, and I said, Ray, how do I get off methadone? He said, you got to go back to doing heroin. I said, I'll be down right now. And I went back to heroin. And then in 2002, 2003, a drug by the name of Suboxone came out. And at that time, I went to see a doctor in the Wrigley Building in downtown Chicago and gave him $500 cash a week for 7 pills. Bottom line, though, I wasn't ready to get sober. I kept the Suboxone around for when I didn't have heroin so I wouldn't get dope sick, and found another doctor. Consequences started happening. Second DUI, lost my license. Then I got a driving on revoke. Then I got a second one. Then I got a third one. Then I got a fourth one. I got really good luck. I got my second driving on revoke and my fourth driving on revoke 8 months apart in 2 different cars in the city of Chicago, in 2 different parts of town by the same Chicago cop. There's 3.5 million people in Chicago. Who gets pulled over by the same cop 8 months apart in 2 different cars? I do. But see, that was God throwing me a life raft and I didn't grab on. That got me my first year in prison. I was sentenced to a year in prison on January 25th of 2008, on my wife's birthday. Happy birthday, honey, I'm going to prison. And prior to going in, I weaned off heroin. I can remember being in Northern Illinois Receiving Center right next to Stateville Correctional Center. You're locked down 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You never leave the cell. I'll never forget that lady putting that first tray through the hole, the chuck hole, and saying I wouldn't feed this stuff to my dead dog. So I ate bread and water for 2 weeks. But in there, my beautiful daughter Abby turned 6 to 7, and I couldn't call her. A couple weeks later, my son Max turned 10 to 11. I couldn't call him, and I swore I'd never do this to my kids again. I got down to Vienna prison, did my last 45 days, and came home. I got home, and my beautiful wife sat me down. And she said, Tim, while you were incarcerated, I applied for a Dunham scholarship to go to nursing school, and I selected number 1. I got a full ride. And I said, Shannon, you don't need to work. I make plenty of money. She said, Tim, the way you're living, you're going to end up in 2 places. You're going to end up dead or back in prison. We got 4 kids to take care of, and I can't rely on you. And she was right. The technology market was hot that year. I started another executive search firm, had an office in the Wrigley Building overlooking Michigan Avenue. Probably made $400,000 or $500,000 that year. And I went right back to drinking and doing drugs. My day would consist of getting up at 4 in the morning, shooting heroin to get my sick off, drinking vodka with coffee. I take the 8 o'clock express train from Aurora, Illinois down to Chicago because I got in at 9 and that's when the bar opened. I'd have 3 or 4 martinis. I'd call up Flacco because Ray had now killed himself because his wife died from a heroin overdose. So now I'm buying drugs from his cousin. Flacco would meet me at my office. I'd buy 5 grams of heroin. I'd go up to my office, shoot dope, be down at the Billy Goat Tavern at 10:30 because that's when they open, drink some more, go back to my office, shoot more dope, maybe make some phone calls, and usually 2 to 3 nights a week I'd sleep under Lower Wacker Drive with the homeless people because that's where I was more comfortable instead of being in my 5-bedroom house with my wife and 4 kids because that's where the disease of addiction takes you, with yourself, by yourself, crying to yourself because I could never put my hand up and ask for help. My wife graduated nursing school, 3 years, top of her class, while working full-time, dealing with the heroin addict husband and raising our 4 children. Do you think I showed up to her graduation? Nah. Why? I was dope sick. And I'll never forget Shannon coming home and taking off her little white hat and throwing the flowers at me her mother bought her and saying, "I hate you, Tim Ryan." She said, "You couldn't have saved yourself 1 of your little bags of heroin to keep your sick off to watch me walk across that stage for 1 hour. I did this for our family. I was the only person that graduated whose spouse was not in the audience." She said, "I reiterate, I hate you, Tim Ryan." Husband of the year right here. December 16th of 2010, I drove one more time. I overdosed while driving. I hit 2 cars. I put 4 people in the hospital, one being a 9-month-old baby. And I don't remember a thing because I was dead. When the cop got up to the car, I had no pulse. They figured I'd been out 4 to 6 minutes. They administered Narcan once, nothing, twice, nothing, 3 times, nothing, 4 times, nothing. And the paramedic looked at the battalion chief and said, "Call the coroner, box this one up, he's gone." And for some reason, he did an injection under my tongue, got a slight pulse, mainlined it into me, and brought me back. I did a week in jail, manipulated my mom into putting up the money to bail me out. I walked out December 23rd. My beautiful wife is sitting outside of 26 in California on the west side of Chicago. She'd been waiting 10 hours for me to get bailed out. Hopped in the car. We drove home in silence. We pulled into our garage, walked into my home office, and those famous words came out of my mouth, "I'm sorry." My wife said, "Tim, you're sorry'd out." She said, "We'll talk in the morning." She went to go to bed, and I said, "Honey, do you know where my glasses are? I'm blind as a bat." She said, "Yeah, I went down to the car, Tim. I got your glasses. Your coat was in there. It's hanging in the closet." And as she turned to walk away, she said, "Oh, good job, Father of the Year. You do know all the kids' Christmas presents were hidden in the back of the van. Half of them are missing." My wife went up to bed. I grabbed my glasses, put them on. I walked to the closet. I got my coat. I opened my coat pocket. There was all the heroin the cops never found. I went right back to doing dope because that's what drug addicts do. We live to use. We use to live. You need to understand, hitting cars, almost killing people will not stop someone from using drugs. I just want to feel normal. Christmas morning, after the kids opened what they could, I hopped a cab to Chicago, got more dope. Monday morning, I went and shuffled some money around, went and got that high-ass lawyer, slapped down 30 grand and said, "Let's beat this." They never got blood or urine. That's how delusional my thinking was. They didn't get blood or urine. I'm going to beat this. My lawyer, Dick, looks at me. He said, "Tim, you're not going to beat anything." He said, "This is your 3rd DUI, your 5th driving on revoke, and they charge you with possession of drugs for the spoon and syringe." He said, "You're going to prison. It's just a matter of how long." I got to a point in my life where I had a gun in my mouth. I was ready to pull the trigger and blow my head off. But I was also raised Catholic. Any Catholics in the house? Craziest friggin' religion in the world. So as a kid, I could go break out Mrs. Martha's house windows, go to the priest, confess, give me 5 Our Fathers, 5 Hail Marys, everything's cool, so I go do my prayers. But if you sin, you're going to hell. You're going to rot in purgatory. What the hell are you talking about? So I was afraid of God my entire life. I was fearful of God. So when I had that gun in my mouth, there was 2 thoughts. Well, if I blow my head off, my kids are going to come home from school and find me. I didn't want that to happen. But if there is a hell or purgatory, I didn't want to rot there. So I just justified in my head, well, let's just go back to using and die that way. And that's what I did. I fought my case for 21 months. In the midst of fighting my case, now all my family knows Dad's a heroin addict. About 3 months into fighting my case, I'm profusely dope sick. And when you don't have opiates, it's like having the flu times 1,000. You're hot, you're cold. So I'm taking a hot bath, and my 17-year-old son, Nicholas, walks in the bathroom. Now, you have to understand with Nick, I wasn't a father. I was a friend. See, I was the dad that let Nick and his buddies drink some beer in the basement, smoke a little pot. I was a cool dad. And I guarantee you there's a few sitting in this audience right now. Mothers, your 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old daughter is not your best friend. Don't get this twisted. You're a parent, be a parent. I wasn't. My son was my friend. And Nick walks in the bathroom and he said, "What's wrong, Pops?" I said, "What do you think, you idiot? I'm dope sick." He's saying, "Not anymore, Dad. Today's your lucky day." And my son threw 2 bags of heroin on the counter. And I got out of the tub and I did them. And I felt good instantly. And I went in my son's room and I said, "Nick, what the hell are you doing?" He said, "Don't worry, Dad, I'm just selling a little bit." I said, "Nick, you need to shut this down immediately. You know what this drug has done to me." My son looked right at me. He said, "Well, Dad, you're a successful drug addict." And I said, "Why would you say that?" "Well, we got a nice house. You got an office in the Wrigley building. You make a good living." See, in my son's delusional mind, because I functioned, he thought I was successful. 3 months later, I found out Nick was doing heroin. So we started doing heroin together. That's how my son and I bonded. Getting high every day. Doing drug runs. Because that's where the disease of addiction takes you. With yourself, by yourself. All morals and values out the window. You use to live, you live to use. And you don't care who gets in your wake. You just want to feel normal. And if it's with my own son, so be it. October 30th of 2012, I sentenced to 7 years in prison. When I walked into prison the second time, right now I weigh about 208. Okay, 210, I can't lie. I weighed 158 pounds. I was skin and bone, I was walking death, I had a $500 a day heroin habit. I defecated and vomited myself for 2 weeks straight. I did not sleep a wink for a month. Total insomnia. And about 2 weeks in, that's where I looked up. I said, "God, gig's up, I'm done. Please take away this obsession and compulsion to use, and I swear I'll turn my will and life over to you, and please let me get into Sheridan Prison." And the next day, I was transferred to Sheridan Prison. In Illinois, there's 28 prisons. There's 2 with therapeutic drug treatment programs, and by the grace of God, I got into one. You do 30 days in one building, 30 in another, and I got into one of the little buildings. And I walk into my cell, and there's this big black guy, 500 pounds, sitting on a bunk reading an AA big book. And I walk in, and I said, "Hey, man, what's up?" And he looks up at me like I bothered him. And he goes, "Hey, Whitey, you into recovery?" I said, "Yeah, why?" He said, "Oh, because if you're not, you ain't coming in this cell, brother, because that's all we do in here." I said, "I'm into recovery." He said, "Hey, I'm Big Perk." I said, "Hey, Big Perk, I'm Tim." And then he looked up at me again. He goes, "Tim, I think I'm going to call you Powder." I said, "You can call me whatever the hell you want to." Big Perk was a gang chief with the conservative ice lords in Chicago for 25 years. A ruthless man. He'd spent over 10 different stints in prison. If you owed him $200, he'd sit you on a bench and break both your legs with the cinder block, and you'd pay him the next day. If you owed him over $500, he'd take you up to a 4-story building, pull out a revolver and say, "Where do you want to get shot, or jump out of the window?" He said, "Most people jumped out of the window and they paid me the next day." His cousin ran their money operation and robbed him for $25,000 cash. So he duct taped him to a chair and ripped his lips off with a set of vice grips. That's who I was in a cell with. 18 hours a day for 13 and a half months. That man helped save my life. He's one of my best friends to this day. Because 18 hours a day in that cell, we studied the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the NA basic text, the Bible. We read hundreds of books on spirituality, cosmic healing, business, Tony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, you name it, I read it. I wasn't there to do push-ups for noodles and get swole. I was there to change. We did group 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Perk and I'd walk the yard. We'd have a 12-step meeting. We'd sit in the day room at night. We'd talk recovery. We had a meeting. I watched the corn grow, get cut down, and grow again. My worst fear was my son was going to die from an overdose while I was in prison. Nick had overdosed 2 more times. That beautiful house I built my wife and 4 kids was lost in foreclosure. So my wife and kids had to rent a big moving truck, pack everything up, put it in storage, and move 20 miles away to their grandmother's house and change schools and friends because of me, because I couldn't put my hand up and ask for help. Father's Day of 2013, I called Shannon. I said, "You bringing the kids to visit today?" She said, "Yes, Tim, but I need to let you know I sent you a package." I'm like, "Cool, what'd you send me, some magazines?" She said, "Tim, I can't do it anymore. I sent you divorce papers." So after 16 years of marriage, 18 years with my wife, she divorced me in prison. She came to visit me that day and still came to visit me every 2 weeks with 2 of our kids. I walked out of prison December 16th of 2013. 3 years to the day I caught my case. I did 13 and a half months in Sheridan prison. I walked out for the first time in my life 13 and a half months clean and sober. Shannon, my former wife, my best friend to this day, picked me up. Went and got my dog Cabo, had to see my dog first. And then downtown Naperville, her and my mom had found a townhouse for me, and it was all set up, all our furniture. She moved all our furniture in there. All our kids came over that night. Nick's, Max, Tanner, Abby. We had Portillo's Italian beefs and hot dogs. You guys ever eat that stuff? Good. If not, you're missing out. We all had Portillo's, and that's the last time I was together with my former wife and 4 kids as family. A couple days later, my parole agent showed up. As soon as Ramsey left, I was at a 12-step base meeting. Got another sponsor, went through the steps again. 3 weeks out of prison, I started working back in the technology space. I took the 6 a.m. train to Chicago, got in at 7, walked to Ogilvie train station, took the 7:25 to Palatine, got in at 8:15, took a bus to work. I commuted 2 hours and 15 minutes each way to work every day. And I was back every night for the 8 o'clock meeting. About 3 months into that, I called my mom, and I said, "Mom, I need to borrow $15,000. And she said, "For what?" And I said, "I want to set up this nonprofit, a Man in Recovery Foundation I told you about." And she said, "Tim, I have one question for you." I said, "What's that?" She said, "Are you going to pay me back this time?" I said, "Yes." She said, "The money will be in your bank tomorrow." I quit my job. I lived on half the money. My girlfriend, who I started dating, helped me write the 22 pages of bylaws and all that, fast-tracked it through the IRS, got another damn expensive lawyer, and set up a Man in Recovery Foundation. We guide and direct indigent people into treatment without resources. We'll pay for people to get into sober living. I started a number of support groups. I actually started the first Heroin Anonymous meeting in DuPage County 4.5 years ago. And 2 weeks in, a kid shows up and he says, "Hey, Mr. Ryan, I hear you operate different. I take benzos, Xanax. Can I come?" I said, "Sure." And 2 weeks later, I had a mother show up with her daughter and say, "I hear you're a little different. Can I sit in on your meeting?" And I had an epiphany. Why don't I have the family members come with the person struggling at the same time, since this is a family disease? So if you come to my meeting, you're talking. I don't care if you're mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, everybody's welcome. You're on Suboxone or Methadone? Come on. You're on heroin? Come on. You're a drunk? Come on. You like to snort glue? Come on. You're a squirrel chaser? You're welcome at my meeting. I'll meet you where you're at. But my job is to try and guide and direct you to an abstinence-based lifestyle that I live today. I stumbled into working in the treatment industry. At 19 months sober, my son Nicholas was in treatment for the 6th time. He's now 20 years old. And I went and met with Nick. And he's like, "Dad, we got such a crazy story. We used to get high together." I started speaking a little bit. He's like, "Dad, I want to work with you. I want to help people." He's like, "Think of this, a father and son that used to get high together, now we're going into high schools and colleges and sharing our message." I said, "Nick, I love it, but you got to get sober." "Don't worry, Dad, I will." 30 days out of treatment, Nick's back in Cook County Jail, selling bogus pills, trying to buy heroin. He did 45 days in jail, got out. Shannon picked him up, took him to lunch, fed him, said, "Nick, we're done. You're not coming to my house, you're not coming to Dad's. All you do is lie, cheat, and steal." I got it figured out. My girlfriend and I are getting an apartment. 5 days out of jail, I called Nick and I said, "Nick, come to my house and get some Narcan." This is 4.5 years ago. We're handing it out at support groups. He couldn't get it at pharmacies. Hell, I was shipping it out of state to where it was illegal because I was sick of people overdosing and not being able to be revived. And he said, Dad, don't worry, I'm not on that BS anymore. And I believed him. 2 days later, August 1st of 2014, Shannon called me at 6 in the morning and said, Tim, get out of bed. I'll be at your house in 5 minutes. Nick overdosed again. We hopped in the car. We shot to Hinsdale Hospital. We ran into the emergency room. Tim and Shannon Ryan here to see our son, Nick. He overdosed. And 30 seconds later, the chaplain walked out. I knew my son was dead. And I'll ask people, what was my next thought? And they'll say, oh, you wanted to go get high. No, my next thought was I'll be at 6 o'clock 12-step meeting. And that's what I did that night. My son Nicholas died on my 21-month sobriety date. I will be the first person to stand here and say I helped kill my own son. My son followed in my footsteps. Even though Nick died on my 21-month sobriety date, I am fully responsible for killing my son. And I had two choices that day, to go get high or go to a meeting and plug in. When we're in the emergency room, I went to identify Nick first. And then I had to go tell Shannon, and we're over our son. I'll never forget that scream. It's embedded in my head forever. And then Shannon said, I hate God. Blank God, he didn't answer my prayers. And I said, Shannon, what I'm going to say is going to sting, but you need to listen to me. I said, maybe God did answer our prayers. It's just not the answer we're looking for. So we left the hospital. I got a call from a newspaper reporter because the next day they were running a big article on me for this big Narcan training event I was doing. And Denise Crosby from the Chicago Sun-Times called and she said, Tim, I'm so sorry to hear about Nick. I'm going to cancel the story. I said, no, you're not. She said, what the hell are you talking about? You're not going on with the training. I said, I absolutely am. I'm laying my son to rest Wednesday night at the church, and Thursday night at the church we're doing the Narcan training. If my son's friends had Narcan, chances are he'd be alive. So the next day in the Chicago Sun-Times, it said, anti-heroin crusader loses son to overdose. In my son's passing, he laid the road for what I do today. There was damn near 1,000 people at my son's funeral. 500 of the people I didn't know, because they were all people that I go to the rooms of recovery with that showed up to support me and my family. I had congressmen at the funeral. It was a celebration of life. A lot of people that lose a loved one live through the day their loved one died. I don't. I celebrate my son's life. Nick touched a lot of people. Two weeks later, Shannon and I had lunch. And my former wife, my best friend in the world, looked me right in the eyes. And she said, Tim Ryan, for once in my life, I'm behind you 1,000%. She said, I want you to go help people. I want you to run your foundation. I want you to run your support groups, because I don't want any mother going through what I went through. Heroin took you, my husband. It took our beautiful home, and it took my firstborn child. She said, I thought about what you said in the emergency room about God. She said, I truly believe God put Nick and I in your life for a reason, Tim. And God had you go through all your struggles and had Nick go through all his, for Nick to pass on to set the stage for what you're going to do next. She said, Tim, the past 35 years of your active addiction have been God's training ground for the mission you're going to move forward with. And I'm just getting started. Since my son Nicholas died, I've attended over 130 funerals in a little over 4 years. I've assisted over 4,000 people into treatment. My life's mission is taking people from dope to hope, helping one addict at a time. I am on the forefront of the opiate epidemic. Oh, and something cool happened. I ended up hearing those famous words again, I'm pregnant. I said, you gotta be shitting me, I'm 46 years old. It's not mine. Yes, it is. My fiance, who's now my wife, gave birth to our daughter. I have a 3-year-old daughter by the name of Mackenzie, who I got to go trick-or-treating with last night, with my 17-year-old daughter and my 6-year-old stepson, and God called one home and blessed me with another. So the gifts of life happen. But I'm on the forefront of this pandemic, and it's just getting worse. This opiate, Xanax, prescription pills, doctors overprescribing, everyone wants to point the finger and blame. It's their fault. It's the cartel's faults. Do you realize that 90% of the prescription pain pills made worldwide are used in the United States of America? 90%. And what are we, 5% of the world's population? See, that's the answer for everything. Take a pill, take a pill. I work for a high-end treatment center over in Delray Beach, Florida. I could work for any treatment center in the United States of America. I get a lot of money thrown at me. Huge dollars. And I turn them all down because the center I work for I believe in. But we're only cash pay or out-of-network insurance. That's it. Sure, we have a standalone detox and all these master-level trauma therapists and addictionologists and that, but out of every 100 people I help, maybe 3 go to transformations. A majority of the people don't have resources or state insurance, and they get caught in a revolving cycle. But I will tell you, as a hardcore heroin addict, when someone is detoxing off opiates or trying to kick, I probably tried to kick heroin 500 times. No exaggeration. It's so difficult because of the vomiting, the defecating, you're hot, you're cold. I would lay down and think 2 hours had went by and it had been 5 minutes. Time stops. And with what? I like this hat. I will be taking this home. That's my, good. See, I kind of do what I want. BRN. I like this one too. Who wants it?
You can have both.
No, we'll raffle them off. I got a phone call last year from an organization up in Alaska that was working with a lot of the indigenous people, a lot of the Native Americans and Eskimos that were opiate addicts. Huge problem. They said, Tim, we're utilizing this bridge device. I said, what the hell is that? And I set to get on a plane and go up there, but a big storm came in. But the lady had showed me a video. And I actually got a phone call from a buddy of mine, Ron Rice. And I don't know who knows Ron. I don't know how the hell he's involved with this. He was one of my bosses that fired me. I worked for him for 3 months, and he held up a pencil, and he said, Timmy, this is a candle. You're burning both ends. I love you, but you're fired. You can't work for me. And the guy always was my mentor, and when I started my foundation, he was my first president. And Ron had called me and told me about what's going on here, and I did a little research, and I said, I need to be involved in this. And they asked me to come down and speak. What we need is more solutions. We don't need more blank medications. Suboxone and methadone are an utter failure. 69% of the people that use them abuse them. They sell it to get more heroin or pills. Not many places have you truly work, if you're going to do an MAT protocol, with a psychiatrist weekly, a therapist, make sure you're working. They just don't do it. They don't have the time. When you can take something like the bridge device and pull somebody out of that hell, because that farmer that was driving for 4 hours dope sick, and you put that thing on, I don't think you realize the peace and serenity you gave that man in 30 minutes. And the clarity. And totally feeling better. And now you're going to be able to offer this to people on an outpatient basis so they can function and work, because a lot of people, even with FMLA, can't leave work. They've got kids, or they're divorced, or they're whatever. Or it's on the whole family. I deal with a lot of families where grandkids, kids, and mom and dad are all using drugs. What's here is working. I would not waste my time on my 6-year sobriety date. I got a lot of other things to do to come down here and speak, unless I believe in it. And this is something that is going to be a game changer very, very quickly. And I'm not saying that I did not get paid to come here. I believe in this product. I've seen what it does. But if people in 2 to 3 months can get that clarity, get out of the post-acute withdrawal syndrome, and have the opportunity to get on the road to recovery. And recovery is not just a 12-step based program. There's many facets. It could be just having a good mentor. It could be seeing a therapist, a life coach, working out, nutrition, eating better, mind, body, and soul. Getting some meditation, whatever in your life. You want to do the church route, do that. You want to do Celebrate Recovery, you want to do Refuge, want to do Smart, do whatever you need to do. Chase squirrels and sing Kumbaya if it keeps you sober. But if you can take an apparatus like that and pull someone out of withdrawal and start getting them into an outpatient environment very quickly, and they can still function and go home, boy, you got a ticket for success. There's a lot of things that have been put in front of me. I was in the technology space for 23 years, made some bad bets on some .coms, could have been retired 10 times over. But if you have the opportunity and the financial means to invest in this, you'd be a fool not to. This is going to be a life game-changing opportunity here. And I'm not here to sell this either. That came out of my own mouth. I am sick and tired of burying people. I'm sick and tired of people saying we didn't have a way to detox. This could just in the prison and jail systems alone with what you could do with this. Court probation services, hospital ER rooms. One of the biggest travesties, and I'll shut up because I could talk for hours. Somebody overdoses. I overdose here right now. They're going to call 911. They're going to whisk me to the hospital. In about 2 hours, I'm fine. I walk my ass right out the door. Can't hold me, can't keep me, unless they Baker Act me. I do know about that in Florida. But most places, you walk right out the door. I started the second program in the United States 3.5 years ago where a drug addict can walk into a police station and ask for help. And I've started these all over the country. And I started in my hometown, Naperville, Illinois, one of the top 10 towns in the country to raise a family. And Brian Cunningham, who was the deputy chief of police, moved 2 towns over to Woodridge, Illinois, to become chief of police. And he called me and he said, Tim, I don't understand this. He said, we had 2 overdoses in the morning. We took them both to Edwards Hospital. I lived 3 blocks from Edwards Hospital, very progressive hospital. He said both those guys were out the hospital within 2 hours. They were both dead 12 hours later. He said, why the hell did they let them leave the hospital? I said, because they didn't have good insurance. I have not taken any mind-altering substances outside of ibuprofen 800 or Tylenol in 6 years. This is a game changer here. So I'll stick around. I have nowhere to go but to that nice hotel and chill in the pool or jacuzzi. Grab my book, read it. What my book will do for you is let you understand the way an addict thinks. The youngest heroin addict I've worked with is 12 years old. The oldest is 78. See, I keep coming up with shit, so hold on. 3 months ago, I was called into a farming community an hour from my house to do an intervention. And I walked into the house, and the 58-year-old gentleman went in his bedroom and came out and he said, Tim, this is my best friend, and it was a 5-gram rock of heroin. And it took me 6 hours to do the intervention, and the next day I met him at the private airport, and I hopped in his $35 million G5 Learjet and flew him to treatment. As this 58-year-old man who makes $50 million a year, has houses in Lake Geneva, Arizona, all over the country, is crying to me saying, my life sucks, I have no friends. I said, Brian, that's because you can't put your hand up and ask for help. You have everything, but you're the loneliest person in the world. This does not discriminate. I've put doctors, lawyers, judges, nurses, professional athletes, and everyone else in between into treatment. We have a pandemic going on, and this is a cutting-edge solution. My name is Tim Ryan. I'm a grade 4 recovering alcoholic. Thank you very much.